the pipeline view, as we come over here, we go into pipelines, the pipeline view shows all the different stages. And of course, if I were to just jump into here, it's no mystery that we have our build stage, our integration build stage, and then we have our first environment, second environment, third environment. Again, call them whatever you want, but you need a minimum of these three environments because they all serve different purposes. And again, if you want 2, 3, 4 different environments for manual testing, that is perfectly fine. Do what you need to do, but this is the minimum. Okay, and so we can see we have tests that are run in the integration build. We also have tests that are run upon first deployment. Before I go into that, I'm just going to kind of show you back in our slides. All right, show you this. I just showed you in real time, so I'm going to skip over this. And as we jump forward, I'm not going to really spend a lot of time on integration build because that's a whole nother webinar of its own. But of course, you have all of the configuration in the Git repository. You can look at that on your own. This is the TDD stage, and this is what we've chosen to call our first deployed environment, where we deploy and then we run full system tests. And so in Azure Pipelines, this is kind of the view, but the YAML for the Octopus create release is right here in the middle, and I kind of gave you a sneak peek at that. And it's inside the deployment process.ocl file. And so as we run that, it's going to integrate over for a project that is referenced. Now, if I just go back, notice that the release number in Octopus create release, the release number is the build number. It makes your life easy. Now, you can do whatever you want, but it does make your life easy if you have really good traceability all the way back to source control and be serious about that build number. So not only is the build going to be generated as such, maybe 1.0. Whatever the build number is, and make that your template. But as we go forward into Octopus, you notice the release number is that exact build number that we have full traceability all the way through. Now, you can add additional markers and whatnot and go to town, but make sure that that build number is inside your release number so that you have traceability. Okay, and as we go forward, I want to highlight one other part of the process, and that is where full system testing fits and how we do trunk-based development. Because if I go back to Octopus Deploy, you notice that Octopus knows that we're on the master branch. Why? Because Octopus is branch aware, and the configuration for the Octopus project is in source control. So if we are branching for a particular feature, and this feature has something new that has to be deployed, or something about one of the deployable components needs to change, guess what? We can change the Octopus project configuration right there, and it will be on our feature branch. It won't affect how builds from the master branch will be deployed just yet, until we actually go through our pull request process and get that merged into master. And so Octopus is feature branch aware. And that's important because it didn't always used to be that way. That's the new config as code capabilities. And so if we look at the flow as we're going through here, all these different activities happen in various places. So way back in requirements and design, we're going to specify the test scenarios that cause a particular new feature to be done. Then on the engineer workstation, we're going to change the code. We're going to run our private build locally. Then we're going to commit and push that code up to our Git repository. Then on the build server, in this case in Azure Pipelines, we are going to run our continuous integration build. It's going to run our unit tests, our component level integration tests, our static analysis. And then still from what was created on the feature branch that we're working on, in our TDD environment, we're going to do our deployment. And Octopus Deploy is going to deploy the packages that were created from the build on our feature branch and deploy to our TDD environment. And then we're going to run our automated full system tests. And I am serious. This is on a feature branch. Why do we do this? Because it doesn't make any sense to submit a pull request if our application is broken. And if we have full system acceptance tests, we don't actually know if all of those tests are still passing with what we changed until we run the tests. And with this automation, it's so easy to run those tests that have to be run against a fully deployed instance of the application and just have it do automatically. And of course, those tests pass. Then we create our pull request, and then this is outside of scope of this, we do our pull request inspection and merge it into master. And then in master, the build kicks off again for a GA level build off the master branch, and then does the deployment. Octopus kind of does the deployment, passes control back to Azure Pipelines. Azure Pipelines runs the tests, and then now we're ready to move on to a manual test environment. Okay, so I want to show you that step in kind of interactively. All right, so if we come over to pipelines, I have, actually, I'll show you how I click into it. I'm clicking on the 100% test passed, all right? And it gives me this view, and I can show in detail all of the different tests. And if I just hide this for screen real estate, I can click on one of these, and it shows me more detail about it passing. But one interesting thing that's really easy and useful to enable is test attachment. And if I just expand this out, this is this particular test. And if that's about as big as I can make it right there. You can see this is the screen, and every step of the test, I've taken another screenshot and I've attached it as a test artifact. And so actually, I haven't shown you the application running yet. It's just a Blazor application, but we have full system test to make sure that as we click, this counter actually works. And we are not kind of messing with any of that yet, but just the counter. So if I go here and go to step 2, I click on the counter, count number 1. Step number 3 is clicking on it again, and this step does it 5 times. And we can see the screenshot, what's happening. Now, when one of these tests fails, it's always a question in our mind, well, what happened? What did the screen look like when the test failed? Well, if every step of the way you're just capturing a screenshot and storing it there, you know exactly what the screen looked like. So that's hugely valuable. Okay, so now before I kind of sum up this, let me just kind of go through and talk about some of the tricks in our Octopus project that are really useful. Okay, we have our process here, and I love using this designer because it's super easy to see what's going on, while at the same time, I can see exactly in detail all of the configuration in source. But when given a choice between kind of parsing the source and the designer, it is just so easy to look at this designer, and everything is high fidelity. It's not like Azure Pipelines where they literally got rid of their designer and now you have to just go spelunking through the YAML. I still like working with the designer. So this is a Azure container app, and we picked this because it's one of the really new Azure services. And with Octopus, you can deploy absolutely any type of application to absolutely anywhere. Now, here's the wrinkle. Azure Container Apps is really new. So while the Octopus team is working on built-in step templates for deploying Azure Container Apps, and it'll be just as easy as everything else that's in the library, it's super new, and there's not a built-in step template that's built out yet, but it doesn't actually matter. Let me show you why. So for deploying, and I'm glossing over the infrastructure as code aspect because you can see this create container app environment where we're deploying an Azure Resource Manager template. We're actually having Azure create this from scratch. Then we're creating the container app from scratch. And then we're getting the URL that Azure gave us. But I don't have time to go into that. When you deploy a revision, you actually add a container revision to the app. And even if you're deploying somewhere that is a super new cloud service and there's no built-in step template just yet in the Octopus library, which is huge, all it takes is running the command line. So I'm just going to show you this and full screen on this guy. There we go. This literally AZ container app update, and here's the container app name, and we're updating it to a particular image tag. Okay, that's the command line for deploying it. And then one additional command line right below to set an environment variable, which in this case, the application needs a connection string to the database. And so we're setting the connection string that it needs to a particular variable. Okay, that's all it takes to deploy this particular Azure resource. And with Octopus, you have all of the structure around this. So in this case, not a built-in step template just yet, no problem. It's a simple command line to do it. And we have all of the power of the variables and the process so that we still have a good structure around it. And overall, we can still see what's happening. Okay. I'm going to just jump back here and talk about your method of thinking when configuring Octopus Deploy across these different environments. Here's the key thing. Do not do any activity, any deployment step, any deployment activity in production for the first time. Everything that you execute against production, you want to make sure that you have practiced it and run it against environments before production. By the time we're deploying to production, every step that's important has been exercised and proven to be stable. And so this chart shows just some of the really common things like migrating the database, deploying the application itself, running a health check, loading static data. If you have a drop down of different regions in your area that you are able to ship products to, maybe a new region comes online, that's static data, and then the rest of them, like running acceptance tests, recreating the database, you don't do that in production. So think of that for yourself. Now, I talked about the check version and the health check. This is just part of the process there. It literally is just running that PowerShell script that I showed you that calls into the application. And so if I were to show you that again in the application, literally we have a web service / version that just gives us back the version of the application. And then with the health check library, it literally is _health check and it's healthy. Now, why did it return back healthy versus unhealthy? Well, it's because all of these health check classes return back healthy. And in this case, we actually did make a round trip to the database in this particular environment to make sure that after deployment, the application starts up. And not only is the web server up, but every one of its dependencies are actually online and reachable, and the application's actually ready to go. That's what it means, okay? All right, so that was the deep dive. And I want to kind of pass it back to John for some more information on the state of software delivery and some of those studies that we have.
Yeah, awesome demo. I love seeing others demo Octopus because I'm usually the one demoing it. So watching someone else demo is always fun. This is another report that was put out by Circle CI entitled "The State of Software Delivery," and I think that reports like this also provide great context. Right? It's one thing to use the tools, but it's another thing to also keep aware of what others are seeing in the industry. So in the next slide, there's a summary of what they found in their report, which is basically, things that are critical for you as an organization when deploying software include things like, what are some of the things that determining your success rate? What is your throughput? What's your MTTR, or your mean time to recovery? And there's a list of your median performance that was observed in the report itself, and then there's what they would classify as the elite benchmark. These actually do align quite closely to what the DORA metrics have, the State of DevOps report has found in the latest version of that report. And so what you're trying to do is trying to align your organization to those DevOps practices, and utilizing a tool like Azure DevOps, Azure Pipelines, Octopus Deploy will help you achieve very close to these types of metrics. Now, of course, that's just one aspect of it. Build pipelines and deployment, those are two critical aspects of software development, but there's other aspects as well. So take into account all of those things when considering those aspects for your CI/CD pipelines. So I just wanted to give you that as an example of something that you could probably achieve to. This is like looking at the health fitness magazine. Okay, where do I stack rank relative to that? But in terms of your organization fitness relative to software development, this will give you some guidelines.
Now, as we kind of come to the end of the demo and the presentation here, one of the offers that we have on the table is a free consultation regarding automated deployments. Whether you've implemented Octopus Deploy and just start thinking, you know what, I know we're missing something. My project and my configuration doesn't look quite like I just saw, and you just want a second set of eyes, or you know that you want to get automated deployments in your team, just give us a call. That's what we're here for. John and his team put out a great product that does the job really, really well. And our job is to make people successful with the practices of automated DevOps with Octopus kind of powering that automation. So we're available, but we have a few minutes left. And I think John answered some questions in the chat, but if anyone has an additional question, you want to put it in the Q&A window, we'll kind of open it up for questions there. And one of the questions that that always gets asked is, how does integrating with Octopus Deploy differ in Azure Pipelines versus GitHub Actions? And there actually is a capabilities difference in Azure Pipelines and GitHub Actions. Now, we may be talking a year from now, and GitHub Actions may have completely closed this gap because they're investing tremendously. But Azure Pipelines, for straightforward deployments to Azure Pipelines has some built-in stuff for that, but you quickly outgrow it and you need to graduate to a more powerful tool like Octopus. But because Azure Pipelines built that out, they can model all of your, at least the names of your environment. You can model all the stages all the way to production. And that's how we can see our environments, and then we can delegate to Octopus Deploy and then return control back to Azure Pipelines for the running of tests, because build servers run tests, not deployment servers. With GitHub Actions, they haven't built out that much yet. And so for GitHub Actions, it's still more straightforward after your build to use the built-in action for creating the release and sending it to Octopus, but then use the Octopus dashboard to promote it across your environments.
So what we've observed, because we're pretty agnostic when it comes to CI servers, we love them all basically. So Azure Pipelines is really good for an integrated experience, and it integrates well across the board. However, the real power, I think, with GitHub Actions is its marketplace. It is currently sitting at 19,000 integrated actions. GitHub is a collaboration platform. It makes total sense that would be its strength. Now, if you're looking for an integrated experience, Azure Pipelines is great. If you're looking for a collaborative experience that maybe has some things that you may be thinking about, like one example might be protection rules, right? So protection rules in GitHub Actions is a real strength there, because that's a collaborative environment, but also what's available through the marketplace as well. You're absolutely right. Environments is a bit of a tough one as well with GitHub Actions. It doesn't have the strongest story there. Whereas Azure Pipelines has a pretty good environment story. But yeah, these environments obviously differ in terms of form and function. So there's lots of things to look at it.
Awesome. Well, John, I think that's a wrap. This was fun. I enjoyed it. I hope all of the attendees got a lot of value. If there's any questions whatsoever, then just kind of reach out. We're happy to help you out. John, thank you for being my co-host.
Thank you very much. It was great to be here.
All right. Well, everybody have a great evening. Farewell.